Welcome into Floyd Street's finest. He is ESPN Louisville's Phil Baker. I am Jack Grossman. Thanks for tuning in. Floyd Street's finest, part of the Field 68 podcast network. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, however you're consuming this. I'm on Twitter at Jack Grossman97. Phil, still working on that double underscore, Phil underscore Baker. One of these days, Phil.
Elon's new Twitter. I can't get a hold of anybody. Jeff Greer gave me the trick, as I said all the time, to get a hold of somebody. I think I'm just stuck with it. The original Phil Baker with no underscores hasn't tweeted since 2010. But look, this is where we are.
Is Twitter actually working today? We're recording this Monday morning.
Somebody was telling me about that. I'm not 100% sure. I was the refresh thing was kind of going up in arms earlier, but I wasn't 100% sure what was going on with it. But I was like, oh, maybe it's my crappy Wi-Fi. But
that's
who
what
knows
I was thinking too. But
2025.
everything else is working. Like we're connected on this. I'm able to check other social media apps. Basically, but my last thing that I can see is from a half hour ago now, a Fred Cowgill tweet about HSJI, which I'm sure they're doing great work, but that I'm trying to figure out if Scotty D's announced if he's actually retired yet.
Yeah, I saw Kent Taylor's tweets about how he's going to be joining him on the Selection Sunday show, and then also, Eric Crawford putting out the tweet about that. Look, we love Scotty D and everything, but I was kind of like of the same ilk as Eric Crawford. I was like, until Scotty D says something, like I don't know what they really put out there, but no, regardless what happened, storied career. Thinking of the guy and what he's built, not just at Bellarmine, but across the city and state. He is definitely the fabric of this community for sure.
Yeah, and this is where I did want to start. So it's a good lead in, actually, of, Jeff Goodman does report on Sunday night that Scott Davenport is going to retire. Doug Davenport, which has been the plan for a couple years now, will take over as the head coach. And just Scott Davenport, as you said it, a living legend in the city of Louisville, from, Louisville native, what he did, winning the 1988 state championship at Ballard, an assistant under Denny Crum and Rick Pitino for about a decade, went to the Final Four of Louisville at '05, and what he built Bellarmine into. Just like I said, a living legend in the city of Louisville. So super happy for, but if it is true and coach is retiring, that he'll get to see kind of that side of it, not have to do the day-to-day stuff anymore. But the game of basketball, especially in the city, is losing someone in the game. Obviously, coach still very much around. It's Scott Davenport, someone that I know that we've both interacted with a bunch personally as well. I got to know him through my time at the station, mainly producing his radio show, and just how good of a person coach is, how friendly he is to everyone, how much he didn't have to give me, a 22-year-old out of college, any lick of respect or anything. Then the amount of people in radio that have egos and all that stuff, he didn't. And obviously in coaching as well with egos, and he didn't have any of that. He always treated not just me but everyone else at the station with respect, always calling us the frat house, which it's a very fitting nickname for ESPN
Pretty
Louisville.
spot on.
Yeah.
Pretty spot on. No, I agree fundamentally. With Scotty D's been like to us, like similar to what you said. Like, I mean, the guy could come up in a group full of Hall of Famers and come up to you. It's like, you had a terrible take on the Sunday show, and I'm like, I don't even know what I said, but again, we should have probably hired him while he was also making the transition to D1 basketball, also as a weekend producer, because I contend he probably consumes more sports talk radio than just about anyone at our station. So he could probably, remember things that we said. But no, again, I've gotten to know some of his family members. Great guy, thinking of Scotty D and everything. And look, I mean, the landscape's changed. I hate it, that the year they won the A-Sun, just that
Right.
stupid rule that's out there that I know has been all over Twitter, and he's still on his quest for that. Wish they could have gone there. The guy has his ringtone as one shining moment. So, I mean, look, he eats, sleeps, and breathes college basketball, but also just a great dude that we've gotten to know, and still texts us. Like, I feel like when he's on his mid-run near the water reservoir of Frankfurt Avenue, when we're giving takes on Sunday morning that are just, so outrageous that it's like, Coach, I don't even know what we said. I don't know. We just said something stupid. I'm sorry. Like, and then I feel like I need to run laps for the guy, but big fan of Coach D, but thinking of him, if it is true, obviously want him to make it on his own terms and announce on his own terms.
Right. But best of luck, whether coach you are retiring or whether you're coming back next year. We're rooting for you either way, man. And always welcome on this podcast, whatever you want. Just let me know.
I got a feeling he's going to be near a mic in some capacity, regardless of this news or not. He's always got to get takes out.
I remember the funniest thing, and when Bellarmine beat Louisville, which I know isn't a very fond memory for a lot of Louisville fans, but I remember that everyone was like at both times really pissed off at Louisville, but also really happy for Scotty and Bellarmine because everything that game meant to him. That was the one time I can remember him being like, because Scotty D will go to a mic whatever possible. That one time though, I remember him saying, "I'm not doing interviews. I'm not doing nothing until after the game," and he
I
was
love
so
when
locked in. He wanted
Blankenbaker
that one.
said, our morning host Mark Blankenbaker was like, "Good luck," and Scotty D's like, "You don't mean that. Like, you don't mean that." It was just a perfect rebuttal from Scotty D during the leading up to the Louisville Bellarmine game for that. But yeah, I mean, look, Knights Hall. I mean, just I would go out there even when they were D2. Nick Kern, I know who we worked with, did play by play for them and during the national championship run, and I'm like, it was. I don't think it's hyperbolic. The style of basketball for the D2 transition to D1, like it's essentially like the San Antonio Spurs, like in the early 2000s, just ball movement, passing, cutting, nothing stagnant around. And I know this wasn't the season they wanted to, put a bow on with it with the record out there, but a changing landscape, a younger team, injuries. But no, I mean, rooting for Scotty D and whatever he decides to do next.
Right, and I mean, it has been tough for him because Bellarmine's a program where they want to, get old and stay old. They want to develop their guys, and you look around the college basketball landscape. I mean, I'm watching Chattanooga on Sunday night in their conference tournament, and Bash Wheelan's playing for the one seed. That's a Bellarmine transfer. Peter Suter's on Miami, Ohio, a team that has a very real chance of winning the MAC. They're a 2 seed. Langdon Haddon's at Indiana on not a great basketball team, but possibly probably an NCAA tournament team at this point. Dylan Penn transferred out and won an American East title at Vermont a couple
Vermont,
years
yeah.
ago. So I mean, you're seeing a lot of his players still making a really big impact in college basketball, but it's kind of been a tough spot with the transfer portal
And I
with
don't know
it.
what you do at that
Yeah.
level either. Like, I'm sorry to be
Right.
interrupt, but it's
No,
just
no,
like
go
I mean,
ahead.
I think it's a Rubik's cube too. And I know we'll get to the Louisville basketball here in a second, but who's I think Dieter and Lieberman were talking about it this morning on the Diener show is like who's the Dodgers of the A Sun with a payroll? Like, and I don't know that, but that's what's fascinating. The big Power Five programs and how they're going to operate from the standpoint of spending to through the NIL and the collectives, but at the A Sun level, who is that? Who has that payroll and who can keep them? And I don't know that.
Right. It was Liberty, but they're in Conference USA now. So
Right.
so I do not know the answer to that. But again, like I went to a game when I was back in Louisville in February. I saw him play Queens, and even though not a great season, you could still see Scotty D coached his tail off, the team playing their tails off. And that was a game where they were down 16 with about 8 minutes left, and they went on a 10-0 run, got all the way back, forced the game to overtime, and a damn real good shot of winning. So credit to them for as much rough a season was. I know they won a couple games down the stretch as well. Right after that, they beat EKU, who is one of the better teams in the A Sun this year. And obviously, best of luck to Doug Davenport if this is indeed the route that they're going on here. And super happy for Scotty Dean retirement.
Yeah, same
Yeah.
here. No, it's a great family, great guy. Fortunate we got to know him, and yes, he is. Maybe he can come down and hang out with a frat house if he decides to go that route. I'm in agreement with you.
You can be an honorary member for sure.
Yes, yes, yes.
Anytime. All right, let's go and hop into it. I just wanted to, with that news being reported on Sunday night, I wanted to say something about Scotty D there. And Phil, great time to have you on as well. Since I was like, all right, good, perfect. Phil and I can definitely talk about this for 8-10 minutes or so. But we want to get into it. It's March Madness, Louisville basketball. That I feel like, Phil, we've finally gotten to the point we were hoping to get to. Louisville has successfully navigated through the morass of the ACC like a ship going through pitch black with no GPS. I think that's the best way of putting it here. The Cards really haven't been challenged in terms of a quad one game, a team that's really going to test you and really be someone that we would say, okay, this will help your NCAA tournament resume a lot since SMU on like January 18th. It's been almost 2 months. And we're finally through that point to where Louisville got through all those that entire stretch. They got through, January and February where they had 9 road games and 14 contests. And other than the Georgia Tech game, they've passed with flying colors. I mean, kind of following up with Stanford on Saturday, a game that you were at, Phil. And let's get this right. You said this last night. I didn't believe you. This is the first time since that Bellarmine game where Bellarmine beat Louisville that you had been to the Yum Center.
Man, I think so. I was doing the math in my head, and just life happens, and it's like one of those things we talked about because I said this with Nick yesterday on the show. Um, I kind of scoffed at it a little bit when we were in it, when talking about like the new wave of fans that were coming up, and it's like you don't see, people would call it, it's like you don't see as many people wearing Louisville stuff, you don't see as many people, kids going to game, you don't see, you see more and more kids wearing Kentucky stuff because that's the cool thing, and I'm like, no, it's like Louisville's just always going to be cool, and I kind of scoffed at it, like I didn't really take it when I was in the know, and then getting removed from it like 180, like the amount of people that were calling, still interested, but it was like a burden to watch it because it was like ingrained in their DNA. So I mean, I want to say I've gone to the Louisville live events. I've gone to some of the exhibitions, but in terms of an actual game, I'm pretty sure it was the last one I went to was with Scotty D beat him back in was that 2022? So
Yeah.
yeah, about 2.5 years, man. Like and like I've had opportunities to go. Life happens. I've got at the age where my life's hectic, running around. Everybody has something. So, but it was just more so. It's like, is this what I really want to invest my free time in on it? Now this season, I have no excuses on it. It's just pure laziness on my part. I've had opportunities to go, but I was like, no, I'm making. It was a pretty day. St. Patty's Day was down in the Highlands, went down there. It just, the energy, man, downtown through the Highlands, and as well as heading into the game in the Yum Center. Look, I mean, it was contagious, and I mean, I think. Did you see Tommy Lloyd talk about Kansas and like what they had is like really special? Did you see him kind of not like scold, but kind of talk down to the Arizona Wildcat fans and just basically it's like, man, we got a ways to go on that. I felt like that was kind of like you could lump Louisville into that on senior day. Again, it's not the 22,000, but there was the largest crowd since 2020 that was in the Yum Center. I mean, the lower bowl and most of like a good portion of the uppers like stayed for like an hour plus to listen to the speeches of the senior ceremonies. Like I was blown away by that. I mean, I saw people talking about this, and I'm like, oh my god, like nobody's leaving from this. So I think they've really ingrained themselves in the community, in the city, into the program, into the tradition of what people were expecting this, or not expecting this team to necessarily do year one for that, but just to kind of get it back on track. And I mean, when Chucky Hepburn kissed the Cardinal bird, like it's nothing's going to surpass, Freedom Hall, Syracuse, the final game there with Louisville in terms of loudness, or the Miracle on Main. But man, it's getting honorary mention of how loud it got inside the Yum Center for that moment right there.
Well, I thought only Michigan State kissed the midcourt logo. I thought that was only their tradition.
Don't tell Dusty May that he wasn't aware.
I honestly like it. I've seen, Chucky Hepburn did it on Saturday. I remember a vivid memory in my childhood is Taekwon Dean doing that in Freedom Hall. And like I've seen Michigan State do that before, but I didn't realize it was like some sacred tradition that they always
same.
do every
I was
year.
kind of like Dusty May. I don't want to sound like a nerdy or as nerdy as Dusty May when he was breaking it down. Like, is that a thing here? But I was kind of like there with you. But Tom Izzo's post game rant, his comments, epic, by the way. Shout out to Tom Izzo
It
for
was
what
very
he was.
Tom Izzo, but
I was shocked that Scott Van Pelt played it on SportsCenter last night. I was like, wow. Okay, they're really leaning into that. I mean, look, 2025. I didn't think we could say that anymore, but apparently they said it on SportsCenter last night. So shout out to that.
I mean, it's the late night Sports Center. It's SVP, man. He has a free reign. This is kind of what
Get a
we've
little
learned,
saucy, yeah.
which honestly has worked for the best for him because that's really the only Sports Center worth watching these days.
Oh,
But
so good, so good.
but it's so good. But I mean, you look at it and like, because I know I only saw two Louisville games in person this year. One of them was the Ole Miss game where they got killed, and then ironically, the other was the Georgia Tech game in February. It was the one game they've lost this calendar year. So maybe don't want to be in the Atlanta region just for the NCAA tournament. Then,
yeah, stay away from it. But I know you're a
but,
basketball Benny. There's no way in hell you're staying away from it.
no, absolutely not. But
yeah,
I took the 2 days off in August to go to those games in Atlanta. But I say that because I haven't gotten a great in-person exposure to it, just because the one game I went to in the M Center was kind of early in the season, and then I did get it in Atlanta because even though it was a road game, they shipped down all of the Southeast Christian buses. I mean, it was probably about 70% Louisville fans at that game. Like it was crazy, but to kind of see it, because I did go to a lot of those Kenny Payne games before I moved down here and took the new job down here. That first year, I went to probably 10 or 11 of them. And it was honestly just kind of a joke. Like if you don't, it very much. Like, I have friends that get mad at me about this, but my view of the Kenny Payne era is like, well, if I don't laugh, I'll get mad at it, so I'd rather just laugh at it, to be completely honest. And that's just kind of how I took it for whatever reason. And the games were kind of like it was comical how bad it was and I mean that not like a laugh at Louisville type deal, just like again, if you don't laugh at it and kind of try to look for a funny side of it, you were going to get mad. A lot of people did get really mad and depressed and sad about it. But the thing I always looked at was it wasn't just Kenny Payne when it comes to like, the fan base and trying to cultivate like young Louisville fans and all that stuff. That's not really, the side of this I usually get into, but I think it's worth mentioning here. But it wasn't just the fact that you had the Kenny Payne years. It was the messy end of the Chris Mack era and the fact that outside of the 2020 season where the tournament got canceled, so you didn't get to reap the benefits of it, you didn't really have that thing rolling the way you wanted to. It was all the off the court stuff at the end of the Patino stuff and even into the Max stuff with the extortion with him and Dino Gaudio and all that gave the program such a black eye that I think it made it easy for a long time for people to either say why should I invest all my time and resources and money into this when they're not giving me anything back and they're quite literally an embarrassment in many ways, both on and off the court. But also, am I going to get ingrain my kids into that culture type of deal? And I think what we've seen this year is it's as you said, they're still not getting like 20,000, 22,000. I don't know if they'll ever get that again, just because of times are
But
changing
18's
and
really good.
right. That's my point. The fact that they're getting like 17, 18, and the people are into it. They're saying, as you said, an hour after the game for senior day, you've kind of seen the rebirth of that passion. And that was something that I know that you guys at the station talked a lot about at the beginning of the year is why Louisville's not drawing nearly the same crowds that Kentucky was. I think it was an unfair comparison just because of Kentucky hadn't gone through all the shit that Louisville had gone through. Yes, they had the 9-16 year, but they hadn't been embarrassed for a decade the way Louisville had, to where not, and this isn't to take anything away from Mark Pope. He brought in basically in a completely new team, and they've been really good and all that. But as far as fan support, he started on third base. Like it was a very different stratosphere that Pat Kelsey was stepping in than what Mark Pope was stepping into. It was going to take time and winning and a commitment to both on the court excellence, personality, and off the court, ingraining yourself into the community from the coach and the team to get to this point. And it's still not a finished product yet, but we've seen how far the strides have come from this to where I always thought it was going to be a longer process for Louisville to get everything fully ramped up excitement wise again. And not to say that people didn't care. I mean, we saw 13,000 for Freedom Hall for an alumni game over the summer, and we saw people going nuts over exhibitions in the Bahamas. So people still clearly cared at the core, but to expand that out to the broader fan base past the diehards, I think was going to take a little bit of time. And I think we've kind of seen the culmination of that the last couple of weeks.
Think about 365 days ago. I can't remember if I was helping you out with this or you were helping us out with the ESPN Louisville Plus stuff on YouTube.
It's always one of the two.
It's one of the two. Yeah, same settings that everyone. Not like and subscribe there too. But Field of 68. Shout out to Jeff Goodman and company breaking all this news out there. Also Jackie Boy building his little platform here. But it's funny to me because I feel like I say this every time I'm on with you. Think about what we discussed about we didn't want alumni, we didn't want former players, we didn't want any of those people kind of interjecting themselves in this just to be Josh Hurd. Now, was it going to be the trendy name? And I see you tweet about this all the time. What's happening with those banners behind your lovely face back there with Indiana basketball? And it's a dose of reality with these programs that have tradition, have history, have the resources of saying, okay, you can't money whip people, as Bobby V says all the time, to get them there. Now, it doesn't hurt for some people that are driven by that, but I mean, think of the ascension of somebody like Ben McCollum, like how he's just like the trendiest person. And quite frankly, like Pat, I didn't know this. I think Joe Giglio put this out on Twitter last night after the Kevin Keats stuff came out about the names and the running of, it was like, hey, the AD at NC State, it was between Will Wade, Kevin Keats, and at the time, Pat Kelsey, which I wasn't aware of being one of the finalists for that. So there's names that are always linked to these jobs that doesn't you may not know them as well, but doesn't mean they're not capable of doing it. They just don't have the resources or the platform that a place like Louisville, like a place like Indiana has. So I think so often we get caught up in it's like, well, Josh Hurt's talking to Scott Drew's representatives, and like I never operated as if he was going to be considered for this job. Like it was great that those things were out there, and it's great to swing for the fences and just optics of it. But I think Pat Kelsey, the notion when Josh Hurt said he wanted somebody who would crawl here, I was like, well, Scott Drew's off the list. Like, I don't know about you, but like
Yeah.
Pat Kelsey, he wasn't a household name, but in terms of wanting to crawl here, being coachable and adaptable. I mean, think about it's so stupid, but I mean, Ethan and I talk about this all the time. Think about how the entire coaching staff like are matching essentially and repping Adidas, which I know people do not care about
I know
cross
Ethan
bottom.
more loves
Yes, but
that.
little things like that, it's like it was a chore to get the previous coaching regime. Ed, think of every broadcast that's been out there because this is something that's popped out to be. It's like Jim Boeheim when he's not sleepy on the broadcast, which I actually think if you can get past some of the silliness of just like monitor, I think he's actually pretty good of just like breaking down basketball. And he's not blatantly missing calls of going out on a player's figure, but that's a discussion for another day. But he says, "Oh my God, he makes coffee nervous." And talking about Pat Kelsey. And I think that is contagious to the practice, how chaotic they're. Look on the sidelines with the student managers, like just how chaotic it is, but everybody's shouting out some things. Paul Rogers was on with Diener this morning. He's talked about this on the coaches show. There's been times where he says he gets mad at the student manager when they're not blurting out. He's like, they better know that damn play. But just the organized structure, it's like an orchestrated chaos, but it looks chaotic. But I think that's contagious to the team and how they play and how, Chucky Hepburn just defensively is just a menace. So I think when we talked about last year in the 2 years, how the team can embody a coach and the coach embodies a team, you've seen both sides of that right now. You saw with getting paid, where I've talked about the energy vampires not running back on defense to where they are now. I think, man, Pat Kelsey, although it wasn't a household name at the time, has definitely checked a ton of boxes, regardless of what you think about the ACC as a whole. They're winning the games. They finished second in there. Quite frankly, they had a chance to win it if UNC doesn't pee down their leg at the end of it. I knew it was over when Jalen Withers went baseline too, but that's and it looks like he was about to just dunk
Jalen
on
Withers was the tweak for
by the way,
Carolina.
look, Jalen Withers, the brief interactions we've had at BD Days seems like a fine young man. But there was a play in that UNC Duke game where he goes baseline. I think he got Cooper Flag in there, goes baseline. Looks like he's about to just cram on half the Duke players, and then proceeds to do like a George Gervin finger roll and just like shock puts it at the backboard. It's like, oh, well, that's still there. But no, I think, man, like just the season in a nutshell, man, you have to be really pleased to just reignite it. Just the passion for some of the people that are on the fence. Look, I mean, somebody like me who hadn't been there in like 2.5 years when it was, appointment things for me to do. Like I would build my schedule around going there. Now life's changed for me with family stuff, but it's just not that I'm not watching it, but making it a part of the fabric of your day to day and your weeks throughout there. The long winter that you have has been a staple of Louisville basketball for fans, and the same for Kentucky and Indiana fans around it, which makes this region so great. So, I mean, kudos to the coaching staff. And although I encourage you for Indiana fans too, if you're watching or listening, just because it's not a household name doesn't mean it's not the right hire.
Look, and I'll say this, and this is something that I've been fighting prefer on Twitter and on in text messages with friends and all that stuff. And I'll be quick here because I know this isn't an Indiana podcast, but if there's any proof of how this IU coaching search was going to go, it was look at Louisville, look at especially Kentucky, because I know IU's finances match a lot more with Kentucky's than Louisville's does. Not to say that Louisville's not in a great place financially, but they don't have the Big Ten SEC money that Indiana and Kentucky do. It's just a fact. You look at both of those schools, though Louisville and Kentucky whiffed on all the big names, kind of fell bare ass over backwards in lesser known guys and have been great. You look at, and I'm not going to advocate for Indiana to hire an assistant with no head coaching experience, but Duke, North Carolina, Arizona, the last 5 times a big time college basketball job has opened, Louisville, Kentucky, Duke, Carolina, Arizona, it hasn't been, well, we're just going to hire TJ Otzelberger or Scott Drew or Dan Hurley. We're going to lure one of these guys away.
Right.
It's we're hiring a mid-major guy or an assistant coach. That's who gets hired these days to these jobs. So for Indiana fans, it's time to learn the lesson from what everyone else has done, and let's recalibrate your expectations here. If it's not TJ Otzelberger, which it's not going to be, that was kind of the one last guy I was really hoping for, but if it's not him or Scott Drew or Dusty May, who can it be? It's probably going to be one of these because yeah, there's the whole Chris Beard angle there. I'm not going to go down that road, but it's going to be one of these lesser known guys, more likely than not. That's, like a Jared Calhoun or a Ben McCollum or the High Point guy who I'm blanking on his name right now, but I really like that guy. But it's going to be a dude that likely people haven't been talking about a lot. And if that's the case, that's okay. I just want him to hire a dude that plays a modern style of basketball and wins games. That shouldn't be too much to ask for there.
Well,
but
and I think, like you said, and I know we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but like it's a dose of reality. And when Josh heard the moment, he said he wanted somebody who would crawl here. I was like, these big time names, they're. I don't mean this in the bad way, but they're fat and happy, like where they are, like because they're living like kings. Like here, you got to have almost like a chip on your shoulder in places like Indiana, a chip on your shoulder, like hey, and it's Alan Haas, the High Point coach. If you're
yes, that's
thinking
right.
of
That's right. That's right.
of that. But look, I mean, no, I think just because it's not a big time name, it doesn't mean it's a bad hire on that. But back to Louisville, man. I think it's what Chucky Hepburn's been able to do, and just like the roar that he got when he exited the game, man. Like I said, it wasn't at the Freedom Hall Kyle Curry game, it wasn't at the Miracle on Main, and I'm sure I'm leaving some other home games out along the way that I attended. But man, it honorable mention, man. It was a massive roar for him, just for what he's been able to do. I mean, like and this is the thing, like I've heard a bunch of callers and seen a bunch of texters debate. It's like, it's just kind of tough for me to kind of wrap my arms around a guy that's not here for 4 years, like DeJuan Wheat. And I think that was something that Paul Rogers was talking about on the coaches show. But I mean, the guy basically, this team as a whole has embraced the tradition of the previous teams that have been here. I mean, Chucky Hepburn says it's like growing up, his favorite player he idolized was Peyton Siva. You don't think that's gonna, check some boxes for some Louisville fans kind of on the fence, even if he's here for a cup of coffee? He kisses the Cardinal bird at midcourt, and just the roar that they get, man. It was definitely something that was like, okay, this, I don't know if it's back there was in 2013, but it's teetering back to the right direction. And I mean, and Brumich and I and Biscuit were sitting together at the game with Ennis, and I'm looking around and I'm like, man, like it's not completely full, but it's damn near close full to the top. And so, look, I think it's a slow drift to kind of get back to where it was, and that's okay. And I think it's a post-COVID world, and I know people don't want to hear that, but habits change. My habits change as somebody who would attend the coaches' shows at Old Charlie's on Breckenridge Lane week after week, or at Tumbleweed, and then also go to the games and work by schedule around Big East game. Like it just, life happens, things change. But now, as somebody who was concerned about the next wave, you've seen them on Twitter of people that have kind of been crying and having all this, fun about the next wave of fans. I think that has at least been halted a little bit for the time being.
Yeah, let's say Chucky Hepburn's proof of, yes, college basketball's changed, but you can still make that type of impact. I know, and he's far from the only example. You look at someone like Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky, coming in and winning National Player of the Year his first year there, the way he was endeared to that fan base type of deal. Dalton Connect at Tennessee last year, same type of deal. You can still make an impact. Yes, I get it's not the 4 years you watch him grow up and all those things, but you can still make impacts even as a 1 year transfer in college basketball. And by the way, Chucky Hepburn. Good on. I had nothing to do with this because I am just a small pawn in the whole scheme, but
You should take credit for this,
yeah.
absolutely, and run with it.
But the Field of 68 does have Chucky Hepburn on their first team All American list, which is completely well deserved and fully, that I don't think he's going to be on a lot of the first team All Americans, but I think he should be. There's not a player that impacts games as many ways as he does from a guard position, whether it be scoring, passing, defensively. He does literally anything and everything you would want him to do. Even if he's not scoring a bunch, he's going to impact the game in so many ways. And I think that is fully deserving that he is on the first team All American list from Field 68. I'm hoping a lot of the other networks there kind of take notice and follow suit on that.
No, I agree. I mean, I saw that we put it out on our social. I saw that out there, and I think the Field of 68, like regardless, look, we have our issues with the coverage that ESPN puts out there. We have our coverage. I think Fox does a pretty good job. John Fanta, I know a part of the Field of 68 is very contagious and great for the sport, but I feel like in terms, and this isn't me being a show because I'm on the podcast, in coverage of the sport as a whole that I felt like has at times been neglected. I think the Field of 68 and CBS and have done a really good job of kind of hoisting the sport up and not just being, did the Dallas Cowboys win the offseason constantly, week in and week out and just kind of yelling and screaming at each other. So, look, I mean, I think ultimately that's awesome, Chucky Hepburn. Like Rummich and I kind of leaned over on Rummich during the game, and Chucky Hepburn's ability to anticipate like a passing lane when he knows that a ball is about to come through there and steal it or pick somebody's pocket, man. It's everything that Louisville fans kind of grew up with like the pressure going back to now. I didn't take in as much as Denny Crum as I did the Rick Pitino years, but everyone tells me the Denny Crum pressure was there. Obviously, the Rick Pitino, Russ Smith, and Peyton Siva pressure over the years was there. So it wasn't out there all the time. But I mean, they had some pressure in that game against Stanford on Saturday. So good on them and good on the Field of 68 for putting Chucky Hepburn out there.
Right. It's a different type of pressure too. Like it's not the same like full court press like Denny Crum always had the 2-2-1 back in the day. Patino had like 18 different types of presses that I could have Coach Lieberman break down on Friday, every single one of them. That'd be a fun podcast during the offseason. I might have to put a pin in that one, but I would completely nerd out on that. But they do pressure the ball so well in the half court. And they really, you look at how they limited Maxime Reynaud in the first half against Stanford, just 1 of 6 shooting, did a really good job setting hard doubles, getting deflections, making it really uncomfortable for him. I know he got it going a little bit the second half, but it kind of turned into, well, Reynaud's getting going. He's a big guy. We don't have a lot of size.
He's a
Okay,
load,
yeah,
Jack.
yeah,
Like, I
he's
mean, seeing him
gonna.
in person, it's just like, my God, this guy's a load. And I think, I don't want to address, like, I've been critical. Our tech side's been critical. Noah Waterman played pretty good defense, like, throughout that game. Like, I feel like we got to give the guy his flowers on that,
Yeah,
as many people have got a bit critical on him. I felt like he held his own against him, and obviously, James Scott, you know what you're going to get from him.
yeah, but I felt like it was a story of two halves, both very, very good halves for Louisville defensively. But that first half, I mean, Stanford's at .600 points per possession, which, for those who don't know, kind of the barometer for average is 1 point per possession. So to hold a team to 40% less of that, that's pretty damn good. If you want the more traditional route, they scored 18 points in the first half. That's not a lot of points, but they did such a good job on Reynaud early, and they made him so uncomfortable. They're sending doubles at him. They're mixing coverages. It was really, really impressive to see how they handled a star big when yes, they were playing bigger because Rain Smith was out. So you had more lineups with Waterman in there with Scott and Traore. You played Anselm eBay some as well, which he was very active in that first half, actually. But you see it where you have that impact where you just suffocated them in the first half. Then the second half, because Maxine Renaud's a really, really great player. He's first team All ACC, probably going to finish third behind Flag and Chucky in the ACC Player of the Year voting for a reason. And he gets going because he's ultimately going to get going. He's 5 of 7 from the field. The Akpara kid hits a couple shots. Those two guys were hit 8 field goals, 8 of 14. The rest of the team was basically non-existent. They cut the water off everywhere else. I mean, they had. I'm pulling up the box score here because I thought I had it memorized, but I clearly don't. So this is pretty poor ass radio on my part. but the rest of the team over there, they're only made 3 field goals. Like for the entire second half, they were 3 of 12 from the field. So it was very much like, okay, these two guys are going to get theirs. We're going to shut the water off everywhere else, and it's going to be a very clear, like, you're not going to be able to just score enough points and overcome the deficit and the big lead that Louisville's jumped out to be able to come all the way back and actually contend in this game.
No, and I think they had some lapses, and this is something that's been I don't want to say a common theme, but if you're nitpicking, again, they won by 20, so it's like I want that to be the story. But talking to Biscuit and Ennis and Rummich and Lightsey, when we were sitting, it's just like I think Stanford scored like 6 straight and kind of got some momentum. Louisville was kind of being lackadaisical at times and just kind of trying to milk the clock, which is the right thing to do. But I think it goes back to this. It's like there's some lapses where you're like, okay, that's kind of concerning in the tournament. But again, we talk about recalibrating expectations. Is that just me like there's not going to be a perfect game, right? Like
Right.
things are going to happen. The other team's trying to. So I'm trying to view it through that scope. But I had a question for you. I brought this up with Lieberman the other day when he was in this.
Let's do this because I'm an idiot
Okay.
and forgot to log into my Zoom account. So I have a
Okay.
minute. I have a minute left on this Zoom.
Okay.
So we'll do it. We'll do an old radio tease here. Let's take a quick break, aka let me set up the new Zoom, and then and then I'll let you ask me this question. So Phil Baker, Jack Grossman, Field of 68 Floyd Street's Finest. We'll be back in a moment here.
The best month of the year is here, which is why you need to know that we are now partnered with BetMGM. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 all through the NCAA tournament. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use the bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not that bet hits. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your hard-earned money. This is how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you get up to $1,500 in bonus bets, regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Most importantly, we do have some fun stuff coming for the conference tournaments and especially for the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boosts, and what I love the most, a nice parlay boost for anything you could possibly imagine betting on in the NCAA tournament, from odds and getting an at-large bid to Final Four futures to the highest seed to make to the Sweet 16. I'm calling it right now. BetMGM is the king of the prop bet for your March Madness needs. So go download the BetMGM app, use the code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request: the best way to support the Field of 68 and our content you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the pod, like and share the YouTube videos, tell your friends about us. It helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back into Floyd Street's Finest. Again, he's Phil Baker. I'm Jack Grossman. Sorry for that on my technical difficulty, more like user error there. But Phil, you said you had a question there before we went to our unprompted break there for a minute.
Yeah, no, we were talking about this on the Bob Valvano show, ESPN Louisville, ESPN 680, 105.7, filling in with Nick Valvano and Coach Mark Lieberman. And we were going over this because I'm kind of on the other side of this, and it's interesting. Coach Lieberman, part of the Final Four teams, it has had success. Been there with Richard Pitino along the way. Okay, so you're going to play somebody in this ACC tournament that's coming up that you've seen like in the last week and a half.
Yes,
And whether it be Cal, Virginia Tech, or Stanford. So Thursday, 7:00, ESPN2. And I'm curious, out of those, is there one that kind of sticks out? I feel like there were lapses at times. I say this as they beat Stanford by 20. But I feel like each team kind of gave Louisville some spells of fits along the way. Obviously, this contingent on what's going to happen with Rain Smith. I know he's put out some things on Twitter that we haven't even gotten into about be back soon. If you want to play cryptic internet sleuth of what emojis mean on there for the senior days. He didn't partake in any of the senior game, but he took part in the senior festivities. But out of those three teams, if you had to pick one, what was one that you would feel the most confident about taking care of business against?
I would rather not play Stanford just because I know you just 20-pieced them, but one, you did just 20-piece them, so you can kind of overlook that a little bit. But secondly, because they do have Maxine Reynaud. I mean, he's a stud. I mean, he's the only player on any of those three teams that you look at and go, okay, that dude can go ball out and win a game on any given night. To where that would be the one, which I know they're the 7th seed, so it's probably the most likely that's the one you'd play. And I still think
Cal's big gave him trouble too, though, man. That was kind of a scrappy, a stance along there, and especially.
Right.
But
Reynaud's a star.
Right.
That's
agree.
the difference there. To where that I would rather not play that if you don't have to. I mean, I feel confident in any of the three games, to be honest. I don't think Virginia Tech will get there because they're the 15 seed. But they were the one that gave Louisville the most trouble of the three, only winning that game by a bucket. But But I would say Stanford just because of the Maxine Raynaud effect would be my thought there.
Yeah, you know what, Lieberman's approach on this is like, and I understand this is why he was a high level Division One assistant coach and probably wired a little bit differently and not fanning out doing the gas baggery media
like
stuff
we're
doing. Exactly, but well, he partakes in it, so he's a part of that media umbrella now too, Coach. But no, it's funny to me because the recency bias, it kind of feels concerning to me because it feels so fresh and new, but it's also like you just 20-pieced it. But as March, we know it's, hey, look, I've been a product of somebody who went up to the Big East tournament multiple times, and I feel like Pittsburgh or West Virginia beat Louisville just about every time. But, in the mid-2000s.
I'm jealous of that. I've always wanted to go to that tournament.
You should go. I'm so happy I went up there. At least a few times. I mean, there's nothing like the energy of the Garden. It is real, and maybe that's just me. The cathedral that is the Garden. It's everything in a nutshell. I know everyone's at the ACC's contingent on being at Tobacco Road for a long time. I'm sure Barclays has some nice energy, but it ain't the Garden. So, man, I'm kind of with you on that too. Just the like where you want to play him. Hopefully Rain Smith can get back out there. I'm going to be curious to see what Pat Kelsey. I know he's talked about this in post game with Jody, and basically kind of implied that he was a fast healer at Charleston. He didn't. This was the first game I believe he missed of his entire career. But he was in a boot. But during the senior day festivities, Rain Smith wasn't. I feel like he is just such a distraction. Even if the points aren't there, you have to cover him and put a blanket on him that he can help, Terrence Edwards or Chucky getting going. And obviously the lob threat was brought back a little bit with James Scott, which has kind of been missing for the last couple of days, or last couple games, I should say, for that. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you with the same blueprint for that. But regardless of the ACC tournament and the state of this, and this is something that's been circulating on Twitter because I feel like everyone's going to rival on this, and I know it's been historically bad, and right now it looks like 3, and maybe if something crazy happens in the ACC tournament, maybe 4 teams are able to get in, but that's being generous. Man, like, I still don't think it should be taken away from any of the stuff with, like, Louisville fans. If you take care of business, like, and you can beat some of these teams, because, like, I'm fascinated with the narrative. If it's something like the Big 12 with the SEC, you're not going to do the conference be conference thing, but yeah. If you get into the tournament, like, Big 12 kind of fell flat on its face last year.
Well, the SEC fell flat on its face last year.
But again, with these mega leagues of what you're able to do, I know you put the record, but like we also have to view it through the scopes that teams can get better too. And I understand the league as a whole has been struggling, but I think like I'm curious to see where they're seated, what's the ceiling they can get, what matchups they get, because I think everyone here is just accepting that they're going to face St. John's and Rick Pitino in some capacity, or try to pair them up against like Wisconsin for the Chucky Hepburn storyline. But as Dieter says, it's hard to avoid these seedings. Man,
well, I mean, but like, if Louisville's a 6 seed, 3 of the projected 3 seeds right now are Wisconsin, St. John's, and Kentucky. So, like, can you really get mad at the committee if you get one of those?
Well, you can't avoid it.
75% chance you get one of those 3 teams if those are on the 3 line and you're a 6.
Yeah, they don't have a dry erase board. It's like, okay, storylines up there, but it would be Shakespearean for the Rick Pitino stuff that I think everyone's kind of preparing themselves for in some capacity. But look, I mean, I think ultimately, like, if they're making the tournament, but I think expectations have changed. This is a theme that we talked about in the show yesterday. It's like, okay, the goal at the beginning of the season was to make the tournament, but I also think they viewed it through the prism of they didn't really know what they had. Now that Louisville fans see what they have, I think they're expecting a win. Look, I mean, Sweet 16s don't grow on trees, but also Chucky Hepburns don't grow on trees. Like I can't recall a point guard that has had, I don't want to say generational point guard, but he's pretty damn special that he's in. So, man, if you have a first-round flame out, now you can start recalibrating your expectations around that. And I think it would probably sting. Like, I would equate it to, like, the bridge year. Like, the final game at Freedom Hall was great. God, I'm, like, referring to the final game at Freedom Hall a lot today.
But, that game was not the bridge year, though. That's the year before the bridge year.
Okay. Yeah. But also – the Friday,
I mean, they lost by Cal by like 18.
Right. That's what I was getting to.
Game.
ACC, who knew?
But let me say this though, that's why this week is so important for Louisville, because right now they're kind of a fringe 6 or 7. I think if you're Louisville 1, you obviously want to win day 1. If you lose that's why that question you posed is such a good question, because that's a game that you can't afford to lose. If you lose that game, maybe you slip down to an 8. You're the 8-9 game. You're kind of screwed, to be completely honest. But if you take care of business on Thursday, you're hoping and begging and pleading to get Clemson. Because I get it, SMU is 49th in net, so that would technically be a quad 1.
Clemson won't hurt you.
But Clemson won't hurt you. And that's a game, if you can help you a lot, kind of solidify yourself as a 6. I don't think you're going to get to a 5,
I
to be
don't either.
completely honest, unless, even if you shock Duke, because we just don't know how
You need a lot of
much.
help. You need a lot of help.
One, you need a lot of help, and two, you just never know how much they're actually factoring in the conference tournament stuff into the seeding. By that point, you're playing Saturday night. The bracket's revealed less than 24 hours later. I don't know how much that actually helps you, type of deal. But I think you're trying to solidify yourself as a 6. Avoid the 8-9 game at all costs for sure, and really give yourself that litmus test of either you win the game and you're riding high, you're feeling good about yourself, you can compete against Duke, or two, if you lose the game, you say, okay, you've been smacked in the mouth a little bit. That's the best team we've played in 2 months. Now you get our chance to recalibrate and get to where we need to go. Maybe kind of shore up some of those things that you've noticed from the last couple of weeks. Because Louisville hadn't been perfect, but it's hard to be perfect when you're playing a bunch of teams that are under 500 for 2 months. And
Yeah.
and my thing on the ACC is, like, look, I think Louisville's probably going to be underseeded because of how bad the rest of the league is, and they have a chance to make like a second weekend type run. But it's going to make it a lot harder being a 6 or a 7 seed than if they were. Yeah, you think of any other time a team is 18-2 in the ACC, they're going to be a 1 seed. Like, it's a very different dichotomy, but that's because of how bad the rest of the league is. And to be quite frank, Louisville didn't take advantage of some of the opportunities they had early on in the season in the non-con. But it's a dangerous game to play. Like, NC State was on the miracle run last year. I think Miami 2 years ago is the perfect example of, they, as a 5 seed, went to the Final Four. That doesn't magically make, Louisville, who is 4-28, Florida State, who is under 500, Virginia Tech, who is under 500, Boston College, who is under 500, Georgia Tech, who is under 500. That doesn't magically make all those teams good all of a sudden.
Agreed.
That means, yes,
They're
Miami
two different.
was
I completely
right.
agree with you on that, because it's like if the SEC falls flat on its face in this tournament, and I don't think that's going to be the case. The narrative shouldn't be that the SEC is a terrible conference if they don't perform in March, but I feel like that is something that it would be kind of boxed.
Well, I mean, we saw it
into.
with the Big Ten in like 2019 and 2020 when they, or 2020 and 2021. Well, I guess not 2020 because they won a tournament there, but in 2021, that year, where the Big Ten fell flat. And that's a stigma where, since then they haven't had the elite teams other than Purdue last year. But it's been like, okay, it's a lot of mid teams that are seeded between 4 and 10. And guess one team seeded between 4 and 10 typically lose in the first weekend. That's how you play the seed line games there. But I think you can say Louisville's underseeded, but it's kind of fair though, because we did this, Coach Lieberman and I compared Louisville's resume to Mississippi State and Maryland in a blind resume. And while Louisville has 4 quad 1 wins, maybe that can turn into 5 if they beat Clemson on Friday, if they end up getting that matchup, or if Indiana, for instance, who's 52nd in net, is able to crack that top 50. But looking at Louisville's quad 1 wins, other than Clemson, who's 22nd in net right now, their other 3 quad 1 wins are teams in the 40s in net. And it's just, that doesn't stack up to a team like Maryland, who has wins over, the 14th team in net, the 16th team in net, and the 27th team in net, or Mississippi State, who has 4 wins in the top 35 in net. It's just, while Louisville has some quad 1 wins, they're not as good as quad 1 wins as teams in the SEC and the Big Ten have. They just aren't. And when you look at the numbers, and that's just a fact. So that's going to slot Louisville behind some of those teams, which is where they're probably going to be in the 6 or 7 range instead of possibly in that 4 or 5 range.
Well, you alluded to this a little bit, and this is kind of more, not necessarily the seeding, but just moving forward with the ACC, a conversation we've had. You've alluded to some of the hires that have been made, the open jobs that are happening. Kevin Keats, former Louisville assistant, obviously the NC State coach, Jeff Goodman putting out there that they're parting ways. Boy, that broke right during our show yesterday as we were starting, and then it was like 5 paragraphs in small font, and then all I see at the bottom is like, I'm entering the transfer portal, and I'm just like, am I being got right now? Like, what's happening? But I know Joe Giglio has alluded to that somebody like Will Wade is out there. So this next crop of jobs that are opening, Jai Lucas is my age, like 36, which is hard to believe. The new Florida State coach,
the old Calipari coaching tree.
Boy, yeah, it's supposed to be a package deal with Patrick Patterson. Remember those days?
Yep.
Yeah, you were probably in elementary school in that time. But I think what the ACC does next, like, I don't want to equate it to like a penny stock or a safe stock. Like, I know you're doing the alumni thing with Florida State, but these other jobs that are opening, what do you make of the future of the ACC in terms of nailing these hires? Is it optics? Is it actually just performance on the court? Is it just the Pat Kelsey mantra of just kind of getting some no names and hoping for the best? Like, what do you make of trying to enhance its image moving forward?
It's less about, well, one, it's just to me how much these schools actually care about basketball. Because yes, we're seeing changes being made at Florida State, Miami, and Virginia, but we also and NC State, but we're also seeing Boston College run it back, Syracuse run it back, Pittsburgh run it back, Virginia Tech run it back. We're seeing a lot of these schools just simply say, Wake Forest, Steve Forbes, another one. Well, it hadn't been working. Yeah, we'll just give it another year, but roll the ball down the court. And I know you guys, I think it was you and Strebel had this conversation last week of, well, give them all the money you want. And kind of do the
It's
Mike
almost like a
Woodson
last
thing.
ditch effort.
But my argument is, one, Wake Forest has had talent. They've had players. They have Efton Reed and Hunter Salas this year. They've had really good talent and they haven't been able to make it work. But two, my big issue with, you look at the league and I think a couple other jobs like Damon Stoudemire at Georgia Tech and Shrewsbury at Notre Dame. Now Shrewsbury's has a great class coming in despite all this next year. But I look at it and I say, are they committing themselves financially already? I mean, you look at Miles Kelly, who was a stud for Georgia Tech last year. Why is he at Auburn right now? Well, I'm guessing Auburn's paying them a lot more than what Georgia Tech was able to pay him. You look at Sean Badula, who had a great career at Virginia Tech. Why is he not at Virginia Tech anymore? Why is he at Ole Miss with Chris Beard now? Probably NIL. Like, and I have no inside info on all this, but how committed are these schools to where I don't think I fully trust them to actually invest NIL wise to do what they need to do to get the talent that they need. Plus, on top of it, a lot of these guys just aren't great coaches, to be honest. I mean, I like Steve Forbes, but he hasn't made an NCAA tournament. I mean, I liked Mike Young when they hired him at Virginia Tech, but it clearly just hasn't worked out. Red Autry, it feels like they're just hoping Kyan Anthony heals all wounds there. Like, you got to make good decisions in hiring coaches. And it's tough when you lose Patino, Boeheim, Coach K, Roy Williams, and Mike Bray, yeah, and Tony Bennett, and Larry Yaga and Leonard Hamilton now in that short of a time period. But you got to hire good coaches, and you have to be ready financially to back those coaches. And those are two things right now that I worry about. Not a Louisville, because they've shown that they're committed to basketball, obviously. Not a Duke. But I mean, like, even in North Carolina, you know why North Carolina's on the bubble this year? They're 1-11 in quad one games because they don't have a front court. You know why they don't have a front court? Because they got outbid by freaking Alabama for Cliff Amorie. When does
that's hard to? Yeah,
and
you should have an unlimited piggy bank with MJ.
Yeah, and you know what they're doing instead? They're giving Bill Belichick, of all people, $57 million to coach football. So you got to look yourself in the eye and say, you can't just rely on the Carolina brand or the ACC brand to win you basketball games anymore. You have to commit yourself, especially when you don't have the TV contracts that the SEC and the Big Ten have. You get into this revenue sharing stuff. You have to look yourself in the eye and say, how are we going to generate the money we need to hire the right coaches and give them the resources they need to actually be successful? And that is the thing that worries me with the ACC long term.
Well, and I know we got to wrap up here in a second, but did you hear the Patino, pardon my take, interview with he was talking about like his time over in the Euro leagues, and basically like as much as it was kind of like it sucked that he had to go over there to Greece,
but it prepared him for NIL.
Exactly, because it's kind of the Euro League of like, hey, we got 1 or 2 years of these guys at max, and it's just a constant changing of the roster. And I think, I mean, again, like, he's one of the greatest coaches of all time, but it's wild that negative thing at the time almost prepared him for what was coming to college basketball that no one really knew. And look, I mean, that's why I think I've kind of recalibrated my expectations to bring it back to the Louisville stuff of like, okay, just make the tournament to like, it's tough putting this together. I'll put it to the Florida State football transfer portal. I know it's much different from that, but I mean, you're not guaranteed of all the pieces working each and every year, regardless of. I mean, you're seeing it.
We saw Eric Musselman. I think is the perfect example. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't.
So that's what's going to be fascinating to be moving forward, and that's not to throw shade at Pat Kelsey, but that's why I think it's so important, and the emphasis on having some success in some capacity with this year, not just being okay with making the tournament, because you've obviously have team chemistry here. There's glimpses; they're not perfect, but a generational point guard, a first-team All-American according to the Field of 68. Terrence Edwards, I think, will be all-conference in some capacity or honorable mention. Javon Hadley kind of flew under the radar, but didn't partake along with Cason Pryor in the senior day festivities, so he could be back next year. Who knows what that's going to look like? And then Rain Smith, who's one of the top shooters in the conference, and maybe in the country for that. So yeah, I think when you put all that in the crock pot, man, it's one thing to say it at the beginning of the year, but I also think it's kind of recalibrated your expectations for the season. So hopefully starts Thursday with some dubs.
Yeah, and let me say this one last thing before we hop off here. Very happy for Louisville that North Carolina's on the opposite side of the bracket. Not that Louisville should be scared or fearing North Carolina by any means, but like I said earlier, you want them to get that Clemson game on Friday. And while North Carolina should not be an NCAA tournament team unless they win the ACC tournament, there are few things that you want to face less on Champ Week than a team that is absolutely desperate, that has a lot of talent, especially in that backcourt with RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, Ian Jackson, Cadeau, and those guys, and is playing de facto home games in Charlotte. So I think to put them on the other side of the bracket where Duke can handle them and kind of take care of that side of things. And if Carolina were to win them, you made them in the championship game. All right, whatever, fine. You deal with it then. But you want to get that Clemson game first. So to where Louisville doesn't have to face them on Thursday or Friday, if they win their game Thursday, I think is a big plus for them. Not just for trying to make it run the ACC tournament, but trying to, as we said again, help their NCAA tournament seeding as much as possible. You want them to play Clemson on Friday.
By the way, to put a bow on that discussion about the new coaching carousel in the ACC, did you see the stat that I think David Hale put out about Jim Boeheim was at Syracuse for 47 years? The combined ACC coaches now have a combined 55 years.
That's incredible.
That's crazy. So again, you've said it multiple times, like the tide's turning, all these things, but no,
which, and this will be the last thing I promise, but good on. I'm not going to just celebrate them for firing a guy, but like it was the right decision to move on for Kevin Keatts. I mean, yes, I know he made a Final Four last year, but look how he made the Final Four. He was trailing Kenny Payne at halftime in that game. They were playing the first day of the tournament. It was the miracle run of all miracle runs. You have to look at the big picture, what he did over 8 years, not just the catching lightning in the bottle for 1 month type of deal. So yeah, I like Kevin Keatts, obviously former Louisville assistant Bertino. He was a dude that I've once really pushed for Indiana to hire before they hired Archie Miller, but it clearly just did not work out. And yes,
NC State should never, and I know this is the first year of it, but they should never not make, and again, I know that this is the first year of not all the teams making it, but I feel as if, man, like NC State's, the Virginias of the world, the Louisvilles of the world, ever moving forward with the that's reserved for right. Boston College of the world. That's reserved for Cal or the other teams. Stanford. I mean, quite frankly, maybe that's dismissive to the Pac-12 brethren that are now ACC.
It is, but we're still going to do it.
But we're still going to do it exactly. So, man, I just think like a place like NC State, like the fact that he didn't do it, regardless of what happened last year. Again, there's a bunch of people around the station that have connections to him that think the world of him, but like you said, it just wasn't working. And I mean, looks like it could be trending in the direction of Will Wade is kind of what some folks are putting out there. So that'll be something to watch for sure as ACC tries to rebrand.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really good hire for them if they got Will Wade. Anyways, that's all we got for today. Coach Lieber and I planning on being back Friday to react to the game on Thursday. Phil, always appreciate the time, my man. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again sometime the next couple weeks, as well as Louisville makes their ACC tournament push this week before starting an NCAA tournament run next week. For Phil Baker of ESPN Louisville Sunday Morning Hangover, I am Jack Grossman, and this